Our items are displaying just as we want them to now, but now what we want to do is to be able to respond when an item is selected. And in most cases what you would do is you would have a click event. But the important point with Ionic is where you put the click event. Before we do that, I want to introduce you to something that many of you will have probably seen, is that in a browser, if you're ever having to debug a browser and see what's going on inside the browser as things change, as things develop, you have to use the developer tools. Now the developer tools are accessed by pressing F12, and then you can position them underneath, and we can then monitor what's happening inside the browser by seeing what happens in here if we're monitoring through the console. Other parts of the developer tools are used for different things, and we'll perhaps use them a little bit later as we develop further things here. But for the moment we should be in the console tab, and you should have it positioned underneath the browser. Remember, that's where you get it from there. From there, and you position it underneath with that. Now what we're going to be able to do with this is we're going to be able to create a click event in our display, which we will then create a function for so that it does something. And in the first instance what we will do is we will just get it to tell us here that the item has been clicked. Now with Ionic it's slightly different from any other frameworks that you would use. Now you might be tempted to put the click event inside the item itself. Now that wouldn't do for Ionic because it doesn't work that way, and you'll end up with problems, particularly when you're developing for iOS. What we have to do is we have to create this item and change it into a button. Now the button plays nicely with the click event, so we just simply put button, and this can stay as an attribute of that button, and then we'll just change this one here to button. If I Control S to save, nothing's changed. Everything's just the same as it was, but now as you see me hovering over the item, I now have the hand which indicates that something can be clicked. So we need to raise the event to which we will respond and show something. So where does that go? Well, it's part of the button. It's a method attribute of the button. And the button has hover attributes, all sorts of attributes, and when we're referring to them we use parentheses, and this one that we want to work with is called the click event, not unnaturally, and we create the event by doing this on item click. This is just a name we give it to it, and it would close with double parentheses, and that's a normal function structure, as you know. But what we want to do is we want to take advantage of the fact that Ionic is data aware, and it's inside this list of inquiries, and it's dealing with one inquiry at this point through the let inquiry of inquiries instruction, through that attribute. So what we can do is ask it to use the current inquiry, the one that it's working with when we do this. So I'm just going to click save just to make sure that nothing has changed completely. You'll see that my console has updated there. And what we now need to do is to create this method so that it can be responded to when this button is clicked. So where does this method go? The method goes in the TypeScript file, home.ts. Now at the moment we have a constructor, and we will use that in due course, but at the moment we don't need it. So if we have any bespoke functions, we put them usually by convention underneath the constructor. There's nothing wrong if you put it above, but by convention we put it underneath the constructor. So our function is called click inquiry, and we now have the scaffolding to write a function. In this case, all we will ask our function to do is to respond to the click event and give us a message in here. So we put here console.log. It's a function like anything else. Now you'll notice that I've terminated this with a semicolon. It's an instruction, getting a bit C# like, isn't it? So we're going to console.log, just text, item clicked, and then return to the console the inquiry that was passed in when the item was clicked here. So I'll save it, and I should get successful compilation, very fast compilation. Everything's working okay in the interface here. So if I now click the Mariam Vance event, object, you'll see that I'm getting the object returned exactly as I said here. I wanted the inquiry that was clicked. It was passed here to the function here, and this function asked me just to return it to the console, which it has done. It's given me all of the attributes of that particular object, but I could have instead just say inquiry dot name or whatever it was, and I would have got one attribute of the inquiry object returned here. So that's really good. We've now got the click event, and we'll work on this click event to make it do some useful work for us. It's really worth reinforcing that we shouldn't use the ion item to respond to the button click event, to the click event, but rather we use a button, particularly because of the iOS response that we get. Now we've got this working nicely. I'm just going to clear the console. If I click Bob Swaggart, I get him, do that, do him, do that, all sorts of things that work when we get our response events. But what the console also offers us, the developer tools in Chrome offer us, is a device mode. Yeah, so we can select the device that we want to demonstrate, and I can do an iPhone 6, refresh the page, and our application now shows, I suppose we should zoom in, an iPhone 6 interface. The default is the Android. This is Chrome. It belongs to Google. Android is Google, so the default is Android. But you can now see that in this iPhone style, a button has a chevron at the side indicating that something should be happening when this item is clicked. So we're in a good place. We have an item. When this button item is clicked, an event is raised called onItemClick. This event is managed by this method, this function here, console.log, and it returns our inquiry with the text item into the console. Now the console gives us the message that's coming from here. But we wanted to do something different. What we're going to do with our event is that when the button here is clicked, this will open a new page that we will use to show and edit our item.